On October 8, 2018, Hurricane Michael underwent a 48-hour rapid intensification period where it went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane. By landfall on October 10, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Hurricane Michael was an unprecedented for the region Category 5 hurricane, making landfall near Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. Hurricane Michael was the strongest hurricane in recorded history to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle. Landing with sustained winds of 161 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 919 millibars, the storm was the fourth most powerful hurricane to hit the United States, spreading devastation far inland through many counties in northwestern Florida, from Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, even through Jackson County and Leon County, where the state capital is located. Hurricane Michael was unique in that it maintained its major hurricane status all the way through the Florida-Georgia state line. As it entered Seminole County, Georgia, it was still a strong Category 3 hurricane. Across northwestern Florida and into the state of Georgia, Hurricane Michael was responsible for $25 billion in damages. These are the 31 voices of Hurricane Michael, representing the many unique experiences and perspectives of the community members who endured the storm and its impacts. Voices of hope, empathy, pain, lessons learned, grit, determination, and extensive insight into one of the most catastrophic hurricane seasons the Florida Panhandle has ever encountered. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and allow me to introduce you to
Hello, I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, here with another voice of Hurricane Michael's voices, Miss Lily McGinley.
Hi.
We're going to let her take over with explaining to us how Panama City felt like home to her prior to the storm.
Well, we moved here, the military moved us here in 2015.
Oh.
Or, I'm sorry, not 2015, 2005.
Oh,
and
continues.
we'd been in Key West for 6 months and we hated it there. We were very miserable and we were so,
Really?
Panama City, we don't drink.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do there. We're both from big cities. My husband's from the Atlanta area.
Yeah.
I'm from Dallas, Texas. Key West is really
My brother
dull
was stationed
after
there
a
for
while.
4 years. So
No,
I've heard the
yeah,
same
we were
thing.
supposed to be there for 3 years, and we were very thankful. So Panama City felt like paradise after that. We could drive other places. There were things to do.
Yeah.
There was a Walmart. There's no Walmart in Key West.
But there's 7,000
That's not okay
places.
with me. So we came up here. We rented a house, and then my husband had the opportunity to get out of the military at his 10-year mark and keep his same job here just as a civilian.
Yep.
And at the time, I was pregnant with our first child, and he was like, I'm really thinking about doing this because then I could stay here. If he had stayed in, we would have gone back to moving every 3 years and a life where he was gone 200 days a year. And he would be watching his kids grow up on webcam. And he didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to do that. I had promised him I would never ask him to get out of the military, but that opportunity presented itself, and I was like,
Yep, gotta take it.
So he did it. It was a pay cut, but it was worth it to us to be able to build a stable life here. He got out 10 days before our son was born. So he went home on Friday as Tech Sergeant McGinley and went back on Monday as Mr. McGinley. He's still there. He works at the Navy base in the dive school for the Air Force, and he's built the school. It's his place. And I've worked really hard to build a community for my kids here because I didn't have that. I grew up as an only child of a single mom. We were constantly moving, trying to get in better situations, better places, better school systems.
Yeah.
She was always moving up, trying to get me into it. So there was no place in the world that felt like home to me. It was just wherever my mom was, that was home. And I wanted my kids to have a place. I wanted them to have a community around them. I wanted them to have community support so when they're older and say they get into trouble, there will be people who go like, oh, I remember when they were a sweet little baby in Sunday school, or I remember when they were in my first grade class, they're not a bad kid. I know their family. Because I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody to give me that kind of grace when I was a teenager because my mom had not been part of the community. So I involved my kids in play groups, the library, churches, everywhere I could involve us. So I have woven them into Panama City. Like they are like yarn in a blanket.
Major roots.
And everywhere we go, there are people that know them. There are people that see my kids are like, oh, is that my Daisy? She's so big. And it makes me feel so good because that's what I wanted. They have been in the same school since they were in kindergarten. They go to Bay Haven. They're going to be in that school till they graduate high school. That was so important to me. So Panama City is my hometown. It's the only hometown I've ever had, and I love it with all my heart.
And you were very familiar with the personality before Storm and post-Storm.
Yes.
Very, very intimately familiar.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So summer of 2018 rolls around. How are you feeling?
Let me back up a little bit. In October of 2017, I had surgery for breast cancer. So it was a very, very hard year. That next year, there had never been any cancer in my family. I was completely blindsided. I was terrified of leaving my kids. That was my biggest fear.
I'm so sorry you went through that as well.
I had surgery. I had radiation. I had a hysterectomy. I had to take medications that had all kinds of unpleasant side effects. And one thing that I didn't know about cancer until I got it is that there's no end zone. There's no finish line. You're never like, okay, well, I'm done. Great. Woo, I beat cancer. The fear is always there.
My father had an episode as well, and it's
never
the same thing.
Goes away. Every time you go for a scan, every time you get a headache, every time anything happens,
it's a lifetime on
you have that moment of, oh gosh, what is this? What is this?
Yeah.
And I had actually just come through that in October of 2018. I had a pain in my ribs that I was really afraid was a bone met. And I had a nuclear bone scan done and some other imaging done. And a friend of mine from high school had just passed away from breast cancer. And I was terrified. I had a horrible week, the week of October 6th. And I got my results back on October 6th that said I was okay. And honestly, after the storm,
really nervous.
I kept thinking of people who had tests after mine, of people who were in the middle of radiation, and how it must feel to not know and be waiting and not be able to get your results. Like that was something that really just weighed on me, and I was so grateful that at least I knew that I didn't have that on top of everything else.
That is something that actually has not been brought to the table yet. This is the first interview that's exposed the Hurricane Michael project to that scenario. So
it was really, I had so much compassion for those people, thinking people are in the middle of radiation. They're supposed to be going 5 days a week, and they can't go at all right now. And they have to sit there worrying that they're not going, and the treatment's not going to work because
I can't even imagine.
Or they had tests and they don't know if they have a cancer recurrence or not, and they're just sitting somewhere else where they're evacuated, not only worried about their home, but worried about their own selves. So, so I've been through a lot of hurricanes. We lived in Key West in 2004, so we had many then. When we moved up here, we had to evacuate for Dennis. I was actually in Miami with my grandparents during Hurricane David. I never want to evacuate. It's a pain, you know, I don't want to go anywhere. And I remember my son was telling me the weekend before the hurricane that there was a tropical storm named Michael, which he thought was really funny because that's his best friend's name. And so they were joking about how Michael was coming to smash up Florida. And I was like, what tropical storm? I haven't even heard about a tropical storm. And then as it turned and grew, and I just started to have a really bad feeling. My husband used to live in the Virgin Islands, so he's been through tons of hurricanes. He doesn't care. And he came home on Monday, and I was like, honey, I really think that we should go to your dad's, because my father-in-law lives in Alabama. And I thought, I really, really feel like we ought to take the kids and go. And he was like, no, I don't want to leave. I don't, what if something like a window blows out at the house and then I can't patch it? Like, I would much rather be here.
So it's not your natural instinct to want to leave, but you had
No,
a feeling.
not at all. I had a
Interesting.
bad feeling. And when he said, no, I don't want to leave, I turned back toward my desk and I looked at the NOAA imaging on the screen, and my stomach just had a pit in it. And I was like, well, I guess we're not leaving then. And I was terrified. And I've never felt like that with a hurricane coming. I was so scared. Meanwhile, my daughter, who was 8 at the time, had become terrified of natural disasters about 6 months beforehand. She had been watching YouTube videos, and all of a sudden she was very interested. We don't have volcanoes here, do we, Mommy? Do we have tornadoes here? Is a tornado going to come? What would a tornado do if it came? And, of course I minimize everything. Oh, it's fine. And then she's like, so there's a hurricane coming here. What's it going to do? And I was like, oh, honey, it'll be fine. And then when Daddy said we're not leaving, she's like, Daddy said we're not leaving? Why aren't we leaving? What's going to happen? And I'm like, it'll be fine. Maybe we'll lose power for a couple hours, but it'll be okay. But I just, between that bad feeling and her constantly, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? When is it coming? What's it going to happen?
Yeah.
And it was driving me crazy. But now I'm so grateful that she is the girl that she is, because part of that relentless questioning was why I took the kids and ended up going.
Oh, yay.
And it's because my little girl is the girl she is, even though it drives me insane sometimes.
She had her little intuition.
Just that nonstop, every minute. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? Well, how's it going to be? How are we going to be okay? And that was driving me nuts. And I was like, I can't sit here for another day of this.
Yeah.
And then my father-in-law said, this is looking like it might be a Category 3. You should really get out. And my husband's like, oh, I don't want to evacuate. It's such a pain. And what if we get stuck in traffic? And what if it turns and goes that way and then we're driving that way? And I was like, I don't know, but I really don't feel great about this. And finally he said, why don't you guys go? Take the kids. Can I keep the dogs here with me? And you take the kids and go to my dad's. And I didn't know if he meant it. I didn't know if this was what he really wanted me to do, or if he wanted me to say, no, honey, I'll stay here with you. I kept every time I would question him sort of one way, he would sort of go the other way. And I was so confused. I was like, do you really want me to leave? Or are you just saying that because you think that's what I want to hear, but then you're going to be sitting back here being angry that I actually left you? Right. And finally it was like, okay, on Tuesday morning when it was still coming right at us, I was like, I'm leaving. I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving. I love you. You'll be fine. He's like, yeah, it's not a big deal. I'll be here with the dogs. I'll sit under the counter. Worst case, it'll be fine. So I got the kids, and I didn't even pack my medication. I forgot shampoo. I forgot. I was so sure we were going to be back in 2 days.
Out of Dodge.
I really was just like, I know I have this bad feeling. But it's silly. It's going to be fine. It's going to be nothing. It's going to be like Dennis, where we left and we're gone for all this time. We came back and there was some extra pine straw in our yard, I packed 2 outfits worth of clothes for me and the kids and left.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any of the stuff I needed because I thought surely I'll be back Wednesday night, Thursday.
Yeah.
Traffic wasn't that bad. We went to, the kids were excited. We're going to Grampy's house, and we went out to dinner. And we're watching the radar, and it's looking
just getting worse and worse.
Bad. And it's like at 3 now. And it's like, gosh, this was nothing on Sunday. This was a tropical storm. And it wasn't turning. It was just, and I was like, wow, I'm really worried. But, and then the kids are like, what's going to happen to Daddy? I'm like, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. We might have some trees fall down, but everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And we got up the next day, and we're watching the news, and we went out to breakfast with my father-in-law, and my husband called and said, oh, it's starting to get really windy. I think we might lose power soon. And so I was talking to him a little bit, and then he sent a picture of the neighbor's big tree in their yard that had fallen over.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, that's a big tree to have fallen down. And we live high up, we're away from the water. I didn't think anything would happen to our house. Yeah. I thought, again, power was my biggest thing, like the power go out.
General area of Panama City?
It's in, right on the Callaway, Parker, Springfield border.
Okay. Yep, that's where I grew up.
So, we're up high there. We don't have we're far off from everything and we're away from the beach. So
Our family felt the same.
Yeah. Yep. I thought surely, worst case, we lose power. That'll be the worst thing that happens. Maybe a tree falls in.
Yep.
And so then I saw the tree in the yard, and it was only like 12 o'clock, 12:30. And then I lost communication with him.
Now that was October 10th,
on the 10th,
day of nightfall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was around 12:30, and that was the last time I heard from him, because that's when Verizon went down.
Yep.
And then, so there's no Verizon, there's no electricity. And so we didn't know.
You entered that atrocious limbo that began for many.
And we watched the news, but the only news we saw was the beach. And I was like, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, if that's how it is at the beach, then surely at our house it's not that bad, because if this is the worst, because the beach is obviously going to be the worst place.
Yeah. They're on the Gulf.
Right. They're in the worst place. So, and that's all the news we saw was just the beach. And so I figured we're fine. Daddy's fine. Everybody's okay. And then we're sitting, I was on Facebook, and I saw somebody else posting, my little sister is with my mom in Callaway, and the roof came off their house. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, well, do they live in like a trailer or something? Like, I was trying to gently find out. And she was like, oh, they had to go to a neighbor's house. And my sister's texting me from under the dining room table saying she's scared they're going to die. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is, I need to find out more. So I'm trying to find information on Facebook, because there's nothing on the news except, oh, look, here's some wind in Panama City. Look, a roof blew off on the beach. Okay. And somebody said responding to that girl whose sister was in Callaway, they said there's a reporter doing a live feed from that area here on Facebook and linked to it. And so I went and I loaded up the video, and I'm looking at it, and I can't figure out where he is.
Yeah.
And there's just water all the way across the street. There's all these light poles down. And I finally posted a comment. I said, where is this? And somebody said he's just passing the Walmart in Callaway.
Oh, my.
Which is right by my house. And the street's covered with water. Where would water even come from there? And there's all the light poles are down. All the lights are off. There's emergency vehicles everywhere. There's trees everywhere. And then I see the Chick-fil-A, and I see the Starbucks, and I'm like,
and if you're not familiar,
this is where I live. I can walk to these places from my house.
And if you're not familiar with the area, this area she's describing is nowhere near water. There's bodies of water, a few communities down, but there's no body of water.
Very, very far away from the water. So the fact that the street was covered in water, I was terrified. And then I see the Chick-fil-A sign that's fallen over, and the Dollar General is just smashed, and the Goodwill, where the Goodwill was just completely. And I went back to the beginning of the video because I was trying to just put it all together, and he actually started at the Navy base and took 98 and filmed all the way around from 98 at the Navy base all the way around to as far as he could get toward Tyndall. They turned him back around Hickory Street. And so I watched the whole thing, and the kids were watching it with me, and we were just stunned. And of course, they're like, is Daddy okay? And I'm like, sure he is.
Yeah.
He has to be. I hope.
Yeah.
And through the grace of God, a good friend of mine lives about a half a mile away, and her adult son had stayed, and he had AT&T.
Okay.
So she was able to get in touch with him because she had left with her younger kids. She got in touch with him, and she said, you walk up to Miss Lily's house and see if Mr. Sean's okay. But that took 4.5 hours until we heard back, because apparently his phone died, and he had to go get another phone and find a battery because there's no way to charge the phones. And so we're sitting there for 4.5 hours like, what happened to him? Why haven't we heard anything? And we're sitting at dinner just waiting and waiting and waiting for this phone call. And my son, who's 12 and, not a very emotional kid, just all of a sudden turned around and he's like, I have a bad feeling that Daddy's not okay. And he started crying. And right then, I got a message from my friend Brandy that said, Shorty made it to your house, and, he woke Sean up, and he's okay. He's he's okay. There's power lines all down in your front yard, and he couldn't get out of the driveway because they're blocking the driveway. There's a power pole blocking the driveway.
Yeah.
But he's okay. And the dogs are okay.
That's good.
So at least then we were able to go to sleep and be like, okay, we know he's alive. Yep. He's safe. And he said he didn't see anything really with the house, but it was dark by then.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, okay, maybe the house is okay. Some trees, power lines fell down, but the house is okay. And then the next day around 10 o'clock, Sean called me and he was like, oh my gosh. So one of the huge tree in the backyard fell on the house. The porch is all ruined. The office had water pouring in, and we have an addition on the back of our house. It's the length of the house. So we basically doubled the size of our house.
Yeah.
And the water came in between the two parts and just waterfalled down the walls. And he was like, I spent the night just sitting under the dining room table on Daisy's gymnastics mat, huddled under a sleeping bag with the dog, just waiting for it to be light out so I could get out.
Yeah.
He didn't even lock the door. Like, he ran out the door, got in the truck with the dogs, and just and he was like, honestly, I didn't even think I would be able to get out of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I had to try.
Yeah.
And eventually he just kept going until he made it up to 10, and that's when he was able to call us.
Oh, he got to Highway 10?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
he couldn't get cell service until he got all the way to 10.
Yeah.
So that's when he called. And he's like, yeah, I set out at the light of day. It took him like 5 hours just to get that far because there was just trees and power lines and everything everywhere. He saw one guy who had obviously like driven up a fallen power line in the night and flipped his car over.
Gosh.
He saw terrible things on his way. And he's like, I just couldn't believe how far it went on. Like, I just kept driving and driving, thinking, surely, once it gets on land, the hurricane stops.
Yeah.
But it just was like a lawnmower all the way up. So we're just sitting there waiting for him, and he finally came. And my daughter had been waiting at the window, and she saw him pull up, and she was so thankful to see him that she went tearing out the front door, and the screen door flew back and hit her in the face and cut her mouth open, and we had to go get stitches instead of greeting Daddy because she whacked her mouth on the screen door.
Girl.
So that was our first post-hurricane injury.
Yeah.
We had many since then, mostly nails in the feet, roofing nails going through our shoes. Yeah, we all wear flip-flops.
Tires are taking it left and right.
Yeah, feet too.
Oh,
yeah, they go through a lot of flip-flops. So. But yeah, so he was like, yeah, the house is bad. It's going to need a lot of work.
Yeah.
I tried to save as much stuff as I could and move things out of, the rooms that were wet.
Yeah.
I think the computers are ruined, and our clothes, like our bedroom ceiling fell in on the bed. Like, just the whole ceiling caved in on the bed. So he said a lot of our clothes got wet and they're gone. And it was... I can't remember how many days it was until we went back. Like, we left the kids at my father-in-law's and came back to meet the insurance adjusters and just sort of see what we could see. And it was horrifying just driving in and watching things go from okay to totally not okay.
The gradient.
Yeah.
Was really intense.
It was, and it was terrifying. And I was like, how do we fix this? Like, how do you fix this much destruction? I didn't even know. And we had to meet the insurance adjuster at the house, and we had the FEMA guy meet us at the house. And we had very, very bad experience with our homeowners insurance before. We'd had to hire a public adjuster and eventually take them to court. It took 2 years in a lawsuit just for some flooring damage. So we hired the public adjuster 5 minutes after we filed our claim. I called and filed the claim. I called the public adjuster. I was like, okay, I need you from the start because I can't talk to these people.
Yep.
I know how they operate, and they're going to try to rip us off.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, their adjuster that met us at the house was going around just marking things down as fine that weren't fine. He missed a hole in the ceiling. Like, you could see daylight through the corner of one of the rooms.
Yeah.
There was a hole right in the corner, and you could see the sunlight coming through it. And he was just like, oh, this room's fine. And I'm like, do you notice that there's a hole in the roof right there?
Yeah.
You can see the sunlight coming through.
Have you had your coffee today?
The water is like, there's water damage on all the walls here.
Yeah.
So thankfully the public adjusters came and walked him through the house and we're like, why don't you reconsider where you're writing these damages are, because there's a lot more damage than you think there is. And excuse me. So we had to go back and forth a lot of times, which is a 3.5-hour drive, often made longer because of all the traffic coming in, and just trying to sort things out. And then it was a matter of waiting for, they first said they would get us a condo for 2 weeks. So they told me,
and that was the insurance.
Our insurance company contracted us to a third party and said, we'll pay for a condo for 2 weeks just to sort of see what's going on.
Yeah.
And they told me how time was of the essence. It was very important. Any property they sent us, we needed to jump on it and just say yay or nay right away. And they're trying to set us up in Mariana and in, Destin. And I'm like, no, we need to be closer. We can't go back and forth. We can't leave our kids and just, no.
Yeah.
So finally I found a place and sent it to them. And I was like, here's an Airbnb. This is in the price range you gave me. Get it booked for us. We were there for 2 weeks. And then they said, well, you're going to have to stay there, permanently. We'll continue paying for it, but you're going to have to stay there. And I said, no.
Yeah.
You told me this was for 2 weeks. So I booked a place we could live with for 2 weeks because I had to grab somewhere.
Yeah.
There's only one bathroom. It's an hour away from my kid's school. I don't know what school's going to start. We can't stay here.
Yeah.
So.
Because at this time, even the schools are closed down. No one's going to school.
So then I had to find they finally just got mad and said, well, find your own place. We'll pay you back for it.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't want to deal with me.
Yeah.
They were like, well, if you don't like that place that you picked out, then you find your own place and we'll send you the money. And I was like, okay. So I found another Airbnb for $2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom. Yeah.
I shouldn't be surprised.
I know.
Been seeing some numbers.
And that was after begging this man to please have kindness in his heart and rent us this place. We had to promise him that we would get out in February so that he could make his spring break money. On Airbnb, his place would be about $5,200 a month.
Yeah.
So he was giving us a good deal.
Yeah.
But we're paying $2,500 a month. And we had to be out in February. That was non-negotiable. He's like, I will not rent to you unless we sign a lease that you are leaving in mid-February, because that's when I make my money. So we lived there through mid-February. We kept dealing with the house, trying to get the insurance to, come through. The house sat there untouched with mold rotting away everything for months.
Very familiar
a
with that.
lot of my things that I thought were safe ended up being ruined, like photo albums, books, things that I can't replace, which I'm still upset about because it just sat there. It sat there and sat there for 4 months before they did anything.
Sorry about that.
And that was with a public adjuster constantly on them.
On it,
So we finally, got a roof put on, and that was at least a start, and got the moldy yuck ripped out and everything. They just gutted the whole entire house.
Yeah.
And then in mid-February, we're trying to figure out where we're going to go after this.
Yeah.
And I was looking online, trying to find condos and rentals and places. And I had 2 different people, owners, literally laugh at me. Actually laugh out loud at the idea that they would rent a long-term rental to me through the summer. They were like, are you kidding?
What?
I'm not going to rent to a local at a bargain price. Are you kidding me?
Is this Panama City Beachside?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to find somewhere to rent, and that's where all the rentals are.
Yeah.
And they just cracked up laughing. They're like, are you joking? No. I mean,
terrible.
even for $3,000 a month, I'm not going to rent you a place. What are you, crazy? That's when I make all my money. And I'm like, so finally I said, honey, we need to buy an RV. And he said, no, I don't know how to, what are we going to do? How are 4 big people and 2 dogs going to live in an RV? I was like, where else are we going to live?
Yeah.
In our rotten, broken, gutted house? No. you find a rental. If you don't like the idea of getting an RV, you go find a place for us to live. There wasn't anywhere for us to live. So we took out some of the money that they already paid us for the roof and went to Tampa and bought an RV, which we knew nothing about. None of us has ever even been in an RV before, much less lived in one and had to deal with the sewer. Just the sewer is a part-time job, dealing with the sewer in the RV. I had to learn everything. Thank God for the nice man at Lazy Days RV, though. He was so kind. I called him and I explained the situation and said, we need the biggest RV we can get for this is how much money we have left. Please help me.
Yeah.
And God bless Derek. He was like the Duke in Cinderella, cramming the stepsister's big foot into the tiny budget. He got us a really good RV for, to the penny, exactly what I asked him for.
That must have been such a nice contrast to your experience.
It was incredibly
nice. I do know that there was quite a few Panama City Beach residents that really were doing their best.
Oh,
but
sure.
Then, they got they were already involved in families. And once that was dry, which is very minimal, then that was it. I'm still astonished by the original interaction.
It was very
nice contrast.
So I was incredibly grateful to that man. He really did. I mean, he sweated and strained, and he was like, okay, we're gonna somehow make this work, because there was one that was reasonably priced, and it was a little over our budget. He was like, okay, and then we got to get the insurance, and we'll get all this, and we'll just squeeze it into your budget. And he did it.
That's awesome.
And he got it delivered, so we didn't even have to learn how to tow an RV, because that in and of itself was scary.
Yeah.
And we went down there to visit, and they gave us a whole walkthrough and showed us how to use everything, and spent a trial night in it before we signed the papers, which was great. I mean, it was really helpful to be able to have my questions asked and, tell me how this works.
And my family is currently in an RV as well. And if you've never been in an RV, it is very interesting what you realize you're about to be cramming into for your daily life.
Yes. And it's every day. Recently, we're like, wow, we have been in this thing for 7 months now, and it's probably going to be another
And we're
4
coming
months.
up on the 1-year anniversary, and you're still in the RV.
Still in it, and probably several more months. Several more months until we get out of it.
Yeah.
And my kids, bless their hearts, they've adapted very well, but they are completely diametrically opposite personalities, having to share a room when they've never shared a room in their lives. And, there's no place, there's not even anywhere that the four of us can sit and watch a movie together.
Yeah.
There's just not enough room. There's no sitting, there's no group place.
You got to play Tetris.
Yeah, we've had to relax our rules about, no screens in the bedrooms, because there's nowhere else for them to do anything. And so that's put a lot of pressure on me, because then, of course, I have to check up on everything and see what they're doing, because they're not sitting in the office where they used to be on their computers. But
are there any random question, are there any little life hacks in this situation as far as parenting went, transitioning from your routine into this whole new environment of also trying to maintain your parental tactics you were implementing before? Anything that can come to mind immediately, and maybe that's too broad and not specific of a question, but
it's been just being diligent.
Yeah.
Like just the online. There's so many dangers for kids online, and it's something I'm really passionate about, because I work online. I'm a search engine evaluator. I know what's out there, and I really worry about my kids and what they're exposed to. And a lot of people think, well, if they're on a certain app and they're invisible and they can't be seen, then it's okay. But they're still seeing everything else.
Yep.
And you have to take that into account too. And that's what a lot of people don't think of.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't just drop your kid off somewhere in some invisible warehouse and hope that inside of it was a bunch of nice people and not degenerates. You know, you just don't know. And so you have to not be lazy about it. Be like, okay, I'm going to check their phone or their tablet or their Chromebook every single night. You know, find apps that work, that you can see what they're doing without interfering with their lives.
At least in the RV, you're kind of always over their shoulder.
Sort of, but you know, they have their own little bunk room, so it's harder than it was. But you know, they've been great. They've tried very hard to not complain.
That's good.
You know, they miss their rooms. They miss their things. All of our stuff is in storage. You know, they're constantly like, when are we going to get our things back? When are we going to have our bedrooms? And, but I've made sure that they've stayed in touch with their friends and tried to keep their social life going. So, you know, they at least felt like they didn't lose everything. They still have their relationships and their,
That's good.
So that's been really important to me to try to keep their lives as normal as I can.
So you're probably, as you expressed, in this situation for another couple months. Do you have any insights on, just for anybody else maybe going through this, to wrap up the interview, any hopes for Panama City moving forward?
I feel like now, as much as, you know, I've built my kids in this community and made
Because you were
myself
absolutely not going anywhere.
a part
right?
of, no,
Okay, good.
never.
'Cause all that root building.
Never. I did not do all that
No, I
work
was
to
gonna
rip
say,
it up.
That's good to hear. That's very
Never.
good to hear.
That was never an option. It was
Yeah.
never on the table. It'd
So-
be like ripping a yarn out of a blanket. I wouldn't do that to my kids.
So you were in it to rebuild.
So, yes. And I feel like now we're even more a part of the community than ever, because now we've built it from the ground up.
Yeah.
You know, we were here through this whole terrible ordeal. We've all been in it together, and we're all
There you go.
storm tested.
Awesome.
You know, our friendships and our relationships in our community
Yeah.
has been tested by one of the worst trials imaginable, and we're still here and we're still strong.
And your roots have turned into cement roots
Yeah.
at this point. That is so good.
And we're just
And I wish it
permanently.
did not have to occur in the way that it did. But I'm really glad that you are part of the community, and I can just feel from our conversation, you as a person, that Panama City is in good hands with Miss Lily, and I'm glad that. Thank you for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you.
It really means a lot to the project, and I hope that your journey in rebuilding and strengthening those roots even more goes as well as possible.
That's my plan.